are you just trying to blend in because your neighbors did it, or do you know? Because some of this stuff's pretty important. You got to vote. A vote is very powerful. It's what sets our country apart from the rest. Your vote matters, and if you're going to use your vote, I think that you owe it not only to yourself but to everybody else that's affected by the power of that one vote to know what it is you're voting for, and most importantly, why. You know, I have friends that are deeply religious. I mean, they're church on Sunday, they're giving money to the church, deeply religious. But if you ask them a few basic questions as to why, almost 100% of the time, hey, why do you belong to that church? Almost 100% of the time, because it's the closest one to my house. So they don't actually know why they believe in the religion. They don't actually know what is the religion teaches. Oh, they heard religion's good. Religion seems like a good thing. That church is local. Let's go there. Let's brand ourselves whatever that church is, and let's tithe 10% to them. Say, guys, are you not smart enough to see that this is nothing more than a business? You've got to pay to get into heaven. This isn't how it works. You know, let's start to break down a few ideas. What is it that you believe that they believe? And make sure this even is the correct church. So, you know, the last thing I want to do is turn this into a two things you don't talk about, religion and politics, and here you and I are talking about both. What I'm trying to talk about is neither religion or politics, but critical thinking. There's something to be said for a guy that actually looks into stuff, examines a few of the facts, and comes up with his own opinion. I mean, we just saw it. We just saw this with the national trial of Casey Anthony, who was on trial for killing her. She was all but convicted. I mean, you know, Bill O'Reilly, who I watch nightly and I happen to rather enjoy, Bill O'Reilly called this the most open and shut public case since O.J. Simpson. And, you know, the jury goes out. The jury heard all the facts. Bill O'Reilly didn't hear all the facts. Jury did. And the jury came back and said she's not guilty. And, you know, our country didn't learn anything from it. Here we are 4 months later, and we got this Trayvon Mitchell case. And everybody's ready to prosecute Zimmerman. It's like, well, wait just a second. You don't know the facts. You don't know anything about it. You don't know what happened. There's witnesses. There's testimony. There's due process. Let's find out what happened. You know, but our country can't learn. They can't remember 3 months ago when they were ready to convict a woman of killing her own daughter, or a jury of her peers said, wait a minute, you got the wrong gal here. So you run into these things on a daily basis, and you know, the people forget, and it's about to happen in this election again. You know, people have been tortured for the last 4 years. And for the next 4+ months, things are going to get really good in this country. You know, gas prices are going to go low. Unemployment is going to drop. Now, of course, those numbers will be fake. The gas prices go down every election cycle. Every single 4 years at election time, gas prices drop as sure as night follows day. You know, that goes back to the 60s. Gas prices drop at election time. But people have very short-term memories. So Obama will be credited with driving that down. People will forget that this happens every 4 years at this time. They'll forget that they're going to go right back up after the November elections. And he'll be reelected.
What does the president have to do with gas prices anyway, directly?
Say that again?
It seems like an odd thing to, what does the president have to do with the price of gas anyway, directly? I mean, it seems like an odd thing to either, you know, vote or not vote. Well, gas is up. He got my vote. He doesn't got my vote. He's down. He's got my vote. Like, really? That's it?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, there's price at the pump, and I think it goes to show how well he's got control and how well he can manipulate or rather politicize foreign affairs. You know, you got to put pressure on some of these countries that are driving these rates up, and you know, can a guy do it or not? Well, every 4 years they go down at election. Every single, it never ever doesn't happen. But you know, people aren't paying attention, and that's okay. But it's also okay for me to point it out. And if you're a politician, you take that into account. You know, if you're a politician, you don't go out and argue the points and the merits. You go out and play emotions because you're astute enough on politics to know that people aren't paying attention.
Yes. And, you know, I think it comes down to really the lack of critical thinking comes down to laziness, essentially.
Right.
Is, you know, like you said about religion, you know, people go, well, I'm Catholic. And you go, oh, so you think homosexuality is a sin? You think that? No, I don't think that. Well, that's what the church says. So why, there's all these different beliefs that you don't share with the church you belong to. Why is that? Well, I was raised that way.
Sure.
Or, my dad was a Republican, so I'm a Republican. It's like,
right.
You got to kind of put in the work yourself. I don't know if you're familiar with the sci-fi writer Harlan Ellison.
Sure.
No?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, there was a really good documentary on him called Dreams with Sharp Teeth. And he had this brilliant quote in it where he said, everyone comes up to me and they say this, just ridiculous bullshit. And I call them on it, and they say, well, I'm entitled to my opinion. And he says, no, you're entitled to your informed opinion. There's a difference.
Right. I like that. I haven't heard that line, but I like it. I think I may start using that.
Feel free, because I think it sums up a lot of things that we're talking about. Of just people like, well, that's what I believe. And it's like, well, you don't really know the facts. You're not informed. And, cop to it if you're not. Like, if you just want to say, well, hey, I just want to vote for Obama because he's cool. All right. That's your prerogative. But don't act like you understand all these geopolitical things that, you're claiming to.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I love how you said that. You're taking the words out of my mouth.
See? That's what I'm saying. I think there's sort of a, despite what your side of the political spectrum you're on, I think there's sort of a camaraderie between people who are anti-bullshit.
Right.
And,
well, that's for sure. I mean, I never care. Wherever a guy's at is where he's at. It doesn't bother me in the least if people think they're right and left. I couldn't possibly care less. As long as you know what it is you believe, as long as you've got some reason, as long as you've got some most basic ideas and facts, I see it all the time, not just in politics, but again with religion. It comes down to, hey, what church you go to, and 99%, it's that other one that's closest to my house, but geez, that's not how it works. That's not how this is supposed to work. That's the business side of religion. Let's talk about the philosophical side. It doesn't work that way. It was never meant to until these guys realized they could get tax shelter and open up a church, call it a church, put a cross on it, throw out a few Bibles, and start tithing 10% from people. And, but nobody really has the rhetorical skills to rebuke church and religion. Because people have such great emotional ties to it. That as that, you start looking like a nut. I'm a religious guy. I do it in defense of religion, not anti-religion, but I'm not for these guys that have learned about the tax shelters that they can get through opening up a church and throwing a cross up and throwing Jesus' name around a little bit here and there and getting everybody in town to come. It's much like voters that go to the polls in November. They don't pay any attention. They just show up. They just show up. Here I am to do my duty. And,
right.
There's really no critical
Again, laziness.
It's laziness. Disappointing.
Yeah.
Typical, but it's disappointing.
This, and throwing Jesus' name around, this coming from a guy whose foreword of his book was written by the one and only Jesus.
Son of God, COO of the universe.
Now, was there any concern that you would be called Chael the blasphemer for doing that?
Well, I don't operate like that.